Good.
Good evening, everyone. This is Spencer Michaud. I'm here at the Great Lakes Astrology Conference 2019, and I have with me Miss Ronnie Dreyer.
Hi.
Welcome, Ronnie.
Good to be here.
Who is a New York City astrologer. Who is this is her first GLAC. So
it's my first GLAC.
Yeah. So how's your experience been so far?
Great.
Yes.
Great. I love these small conferences.
Yeah.
I really do, because you can really get to talk to people and meet people. You're not like running around trying to find people. It's, the regional conferences, they're really undervalued and
Absolutely.
underestimated, and the lectures, the quality, and I've been going to all the lectures. Oftentimes I'm preparing and I don't go.
Right.
Every single lecture, yours was great.
Thank you.
I really learned a lot from
Thank
your
you.
lecture, and they were all high quality. Every single one of them, totally high quality.
Nice.
So it's a great conference, really great.
It's been good so far. The energy's been real good. We've got a real high quality staff, faculty.
Yeah, really.
So you're totally spot on with that.
It's good.
So you had a couple lectures.
I did.
And you've had one already, and you have one that's coming. So what have you been talking about?
So yesterday I talked about Astral Cartography, kind of revealing things that I've learned about it over
So for our viewers,
many years.
So what is
Astro-Cartography is locality astrology or astro mapping. It's a system by which you look at a chart and you can see all over the world at that given moment where the planets are angular.
Nice.
So you can also in a software program see the entire chart, but the way Jim Lewis did it was he projected everything onto a map.
Okay.
And you can very quickly see where your planets are angular, and it gives you an idea of which planets may be prominent in any place. So if you want to move to a place or do business with somebody.
So we have lines. We have these lines.
These lines
on the map.
And the lines on the map are going to be the ascendant descendant lines. If you do a map of the whole world, the ascendant descendant lines go like this, and the midheaven IC lines go this.
So you got this here.
So this book is really what I base a lot of my talk on, and it's Jim Lewis created the system. He died in '95, unfortunately, and it was co-written with my husband, Kenneth Irving.
Nice.
And I knew Jim well. So the book was published first in 1997.
Okay.
Then it went out of print, and so Ken and I, with our publishing company, Words and Things, we republished it.
But we can see the lines here that are representing the planetary lines, right?
Right. Exactly.
And from my understanding, you can enlighten me, that these planetary lines are showing what type of energy you might experience in that particular locale.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
And these are the ascendant descendant lines that go around the world, and then the midheaven IC lines in different places.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So it was a good lecture. I thought it was a good lecture.
What line is going through New York City for you?
Well, it's my birthplace.
Yeah. Right. Oh, well,
so
there you go.
So I have moon on my descendant, very tight.
Yeah.
And then Jupiter on my midheaven, Sun on my midheaven. Pluto's a little wide on the ascendant, but the closest one is moon to the descendant.
Ann Arbor is actually a moon line for me.
Oh, good.
So,
me too, in New York.
I mean, to me, from my understanding, where the moon is somewhere that you will feel comfortable in at home.
As well, and reaching out to the public.
Depending on the condition in your chart, though, too.
Exactly.
Right? Because you do want to examine planetary condition
to
see how well it's going to function, that place in particular.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great topic, actually.
And what else you got here?
So I have here, this is my Vedic astrology book, which is, I wrote this in 1997, and it's still out there, and it got a new life. That's my book.
Yeah.
And it has a new life due to it being an ebook now.
Nice.
Weiser's published it. It needs, I need to do another one.
Okay.
Needs a little revision, but I've been a Vedic astrologer since I studied in India many years ago.
Okay.
But I still do Western astrology. I never gave that up. So I do them both kind of side by side.
Right.
And some of my lectures I can put in both systems, and it kind of works really well together.
And you're going to be talking about the nodes.
Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about the transiting nodes.
Okay.
Meaning that, what the nodes are. I give a talk for about 15, 20 minutes just about the symbolism of the nodes and how they differ in different systems and what they represent, the intensity of them.
Which is important with the eclipses coming up. Because the eclipses are really connected with the nodes.
Exactly. Right? And I do a lot of eclipse work.
Right.
So this is going to be a nodes lecture, but you have to bring in the eclipses, especially this week.
So can you tell me, what would you say are the main differences between the Western and the Eastern understanding of the nodes?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very long topic.
I know, that's a big question.
Quickly.
Let's see how succinct you can be.
Very quickly. I mean, in ancient traditions, there was no Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
Right.
Okay. So there were the nodes. And in India, the what we call the grahas, which are like the heavenly bodies,
The
or
grabbers.
they're calling the
Right.
grabbers or the seizers.
Right.
You know, they seize you, and that's the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And then when you add the nodes, they become 9 planets or 9 heavenly bodies or Caesars. So it's 9 Navagraha.
Right.
And you worship them. They have Navagraha altars in
Right.
Hindu temples. And so the nodes became adapted into the astrology.
Okay.
And they are considered to be the demonic, they're demons.
Right.
In a sense. Rahu is the north node, Ketu is the south node. Now, in Western astrology, we use a lot the south node as where our habits lie. It's very habitual. We're
Right.
comfortable there. The north node is the point of evolution where we need to go to.
Right.
And in India, it works in a way similarly, except that the north node is very much affiliated with Saturn, and the south node is very affiliated with Mars. You know, so Rahu is very determined, it's very materialistic, and Ketu can sort of take away anything really quickly.
Right.
But it's also very spiritual.
Okay.
So you kind of get rid of things with Mars or with Ketu, sorry. And it is in Chinese lore and what we've come down to learn, it's the head and tail of the dragon.
Right.
But in India, there were never dragons. That's something that came out later on and sort of got a little bit conflated. But in India, it was really the demon Rahu. Rahu was a demon, and he tried to interfere with the gods.
Okay.
So the demon helped the gods to kind of bring up the riches of the water of the earth. They were digging up the amrita, which is nectar, and then they were churning the ocean. And what happened was when they celebrated, Rahu disguised himself and went in and took the nectar from the sun and the moon, which made them immortal.
Right. Yeah.
So suddenly there was this immortal demon,
Right.
and you know they were all mortified. And so Vishnu took his discus and just threw it, and so this demon became decapitated.
Yep. Took his head right off.
So it became a head,
Right.
and then it became a tail, and the symbolism was actually a serpent.
Yeah.
Because it was like the serpent of time, and also it was the serpent that they wrapped around the mountain when they took out all the nectar and riches from the water. So really in India, when you see a lot of Rahu and Ketu iconography, it's built into a serpent kind of. So it's like that very sort of swirly, wavy thing that actually later on in other mythologies was the dragon.
Right.
But there was really no dragon. But what it is also, if you see a lot of iconography, Rahu is depicted as a disembodied head.
So as the head,
it's the head.
Rahu would be associated with desire?
Desire,
Yeah.
but desire that never gets fulfilled.
Right.
So it's insatiable.
Insatiable desire.
It's insatiable, the appetite, because there's no
Right.
digestion. It's just this
Right.
head. So Rahu is considered to be very tempting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very tempting, it's very intense, and it's very much associated with addiction.
Right.
You know, and Ketu is the bottom, so it's like the waste material.
Processing.
Right. Everything gets wasted and thrown
Okay.
away. So in a way, it's also associated with asceticism. So because you're divesting yourself of things, you're non-attached. So the whole idea of detachment. You know,
so that's what we've got with Saturn and K2.
and of course, because they're associated with eclipses,
right.
you know, the whole idea of eclipses was very scary, you know.
Well, anytime the sun disappears and appears to be swallowed by a snake or a dragon,
that's what it was.
People are going to freak out a little bit.
Well, that's the whole myth that they
Right.
they chased, you know, the demons chased the sun and moon through eternity.
Right.
And then when they caught up with them and swallowed them, that's when you got the eclipses.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's Rahu and Ketu, you know, really we don't, you know, they didn't really use them in Indian astrology. Recently, I mean, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they weren't used. Recently, a lot of Indian astrologers use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, especially for transits. But in the birth chart, the Rahu Ketu energy oftentimes can really sub for that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto because they're so intense. You know,
I've noticed a lot of similarities in the Hellenistic system with the Vedic system. And the really interesting thing about Vedic astrology or Jyotisha, right?
Yeah, Jyotisha.
Is that Jyotisha did not have a break in the lineage.
Right.
So that, from my understanding,
Mhm.
okay, my limited understanding,
Yeah,
okay,
no.
that it was passed down and passed down and passed down for thousands of years.
Right.
Whereas in the Hellenistic tradition, we had this break. It went underground. It had to be rediscovered. So I think looking to Jyotisha to solve some of the clues with the
Mhm.
Hellenistic system is important too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that can be cross-pollinated and positive interaction between those two systems of understanding.
Well, that's
Right.
really that. I mean, you do find that traditional astrology and Vedic astrology or Jyotisha have more in common than, let's say, traditional Hellenistic and modern Western.
Absolutely.
And that's because they really are. There was an interflow of ideas. You know, you had the Silk Road, and you had everybody traveling all those
Right.
routes together, and even
Yeah.
the intellectuals exchanged ideas.
Do you know Kenneth Miller?
Sure.
Yeah, Kenneth
Ken does the same.
gave a great talk at
At
UAC
UAC.
about the
Yeah, I was at that talk.
is there curry in my feta?
Yes,
Is what
I
it
was
was
at
called,
that talk.
right?
You were there
Yeah.
also? Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
I was
So
there.
he's a genius.
Yeah.
And his argument was that exactly that.
Same thing.
That the Spice Road, there was a cross pollination of
Exactly.
ideas. So
It went back and forth. And the thing is, in India, is that what happened was this, when the zodiac came into play, a lot of the astrology really became very similar, but then it got individualized and it got Indianized.
Right.
You know, because there were certain things that came from Greece that made no sense.
Yeah.
In India. So you do get certain techniques that are very similar.
Well,
and then they
there's some-
each kind of
There's
went
some
in their
cultural
own
things
the
that
cultural
are different.
differences.
Right.
Right. The iconography is different.
Philosophies. You
Right.
know?
Exactly. You know,
Cool.
so you get a lot of that, the differences, but you get a lot of similarities. And they do fill in gaps.
Yeah.
I mean, and I remember, in fact, one of the Project Hindsights that they had, one of the conclaves early on, I mean, going back to 1995, the theme of that conclave was Vedic and Western. And it was wonderful because Robert Schmidt and Robert Hand were also there with K.N. Rao, who's a very well-known Indian astrologer. And it was fantastic because they were comparing techniques. And they were discovering how similar they were.
Well, and they use primarily whole sign houses in
Whole sign
Jyotisha.
houses.
So, I mean, there
Same
you go. That's a big connection right there.
Right, exactly.
One of the confirmations of that technique, you know, being, I don't know, we don't want to get into a house debate, but,
Right.
you know, in my practice, I use whole sign houses for topical things.
Right.
And then you can use quadrant-based houses for more timing techniques and planetary strength. Right. That's my understanding and how I use it.
Right.
Not that one is necessarily better than the other. They just have different applications in the Hellenistic system.
Right.
So it's really interesting to see the connections with that. That's great.
Yeah, there's a little different. There's also some other house systems that actually come into play in India too.
Cool.
You know, that are also kind of like porphyry based, like quadrant based, and then something that's called Shripati. They also start with the degree of the ascendant, and then the house is 15 degrees on either side.
Cool.
And that's called a Bhava chart. Bhava means house. But the whole sign house system is really the one that's primarily used.
Cool.
But the difference, of course, is that it's the sidereal zodiac.
Yeah.
And then in Hellenistic, they still do the tropical. So it's a little different, but the techniques
Well,
are
and
the
that's
same.
a whole nother thing.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole nother story we could get into.
Yeah.
So you're going to do this talk tomorrow.
I'm going to do the talk tomorrow about the transiting lunar nodes.
Okay.
And just interesting charts where the nodes have kind of come into, especially on people's angles. You know, when the transiting lunar nodes transit your ascendant, descendant, midheaven, IC, really intense things happen.
Right.
And I'm going to use Obama's chart, for instance, and show how the nodes really interplayed with the time that he made his first speech at the 2004 convention, and then started winning in 2008 the primaries, and then got the nomination. So a lot of nodal connections.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what do
interesting.
Do you have any classes or offerings coming up as well?
Yeah, I'm doing an eclipse webinar on July 6th.
Okay.
And I do every year at the beginning of the year a webinar about all the sensitive degrees of the year. So this is going to repeat a little bit of that, but we're going to go further and just focus on these two eclipses. Because these two eclipses also take into account the Saturn South Node or Ketu conjunction.
Yeah.
That's been a major theme this year.
That's right.
And this year, this week, with that eclipse is also part of the heat wave we're having.
Right. Yeah.
That has a lot to do with Saturn and the South Node. The South Node is like Mars. So you're getting the dryness, the heat, you know. So, and that's on my website. You can find the registration.
Yeah, where can we find you?
I'm on RonnieDryer.com. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. So you can find information about the webinar and all my other classes and
Fantastic.
offerings,
All
things
right.
like that.
Well, thank you, Ronnie.
Thank
It's
you,
a pleasure.
Spencer.
Yeah, thank
We
you
had
for
a great
joining
time,
me.
and
All right.
everybody should come to GLAC next year if you
Okay.
haven't come. It's a great conference.
I'm having a
I
good
love
time.
it. Me too.
All right. Well, thank you.
Cool.
Take care, everybody.
Okay,
All right.
bye.